Hey everyone, welcome back to another bullet train devlog. This week I got to actually quite a few new additions, so let's jump right in. The first main additions were quite a few new orbs. These were sometimes quite basic orbs which I just still needed to do, but I took time now to actually implement them. Such as finishing my elemental damage types, water damage and nature, which might be renamed to earth at some point, but also things like just more range. I then included also a few more interesting orbs, such as damage for close range or adding attack speed after a dodge. These will now be able to show up just during normal gameplay. Then the second big part was the actual continuation after the first boss, which I already talked about it last week. There's had still a few code changes as basis, because there were quite a few things I wanted to have more control over, especially regarding tower spawning. What kinds of towers I can spawn, how many towers of each kind are spawned, and such things. After taking some look at more playtest results, I also decided to make upgrades in general more powerful. Because before it just actually often felt not worth it combining two weapons into one, because the resulting singular weapon would just be way less powerful than the two individual weapons. I still need to playtest if that now feels better with the change, but I would hope so. There were also still a few issues with the level generation, which I took another look at. Often selecting a rail on these maps did not match up with the actual paths that are shown here. As this is of course an issue with choosing the path you want to take, I took a look at that before I continued with the levels after the first boss. I also adjusted the first boss. This boss now is way easier to deal with. It has way less weapons and therefore should just be a way easier boss to handle. Might be too easy for now, but otherwise it was really difficult to get past that first hurdle before. So I think I will for now take it a bit more easy. But then if playtest shows this is now way too simple, also take another look at how to make that first boss encounter maybe a bit more interesting. But now after the first boss of this first level, we will come to the second level, which will introduce new towers, which have just more health, and also towers will now have weapons on them. I will now start with quite easy weapons, as they are only the ballistas, so they will only shoot forward across the rail, but these are things that you then must avoid or take into account the damage they will do to your train. In this level we will not have new obstacles or anything, but just introducing the concept of different towers. The boss you fight in the end area of the second level will now actually be the boss that I originally planned for the first area. It is still quite tough. It should now be easier to handle with the weapons and upgrades you got from the first and the second level. As final point, I also started working on a new movement mode for the train, so similar to the drifting mechanic I created a few weeks ago. I feel like this is not ready to be shown yet, but I think it should be done next week, so I hope you look forward to that. But with that was everything that I did this week. For next week, I will continue working on the levels after the first and now second boss. I think there is still a few improvements for the second level, and then of course also the continuing level afterwards. One thing I also want to take a look at is how to make the levels of each world visually a bit more distinct, because currently I'm just using the same environment for level 1 and level 2. And then of course, as a final thing, I will work on my new planned movement mode. So that is really ready for next week. But with that was already everything for this week. So as always, if you have questions or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Otherwise, see you next week. Bye.